Hi lovely booktubers, I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Raina Read Stuff. I'm here in the book shack. Today I am going to talk Historathon. We're getting to the end of Q3. Now I have to confess, I haven't been hugely active during Q3. The time period was 1500 to 1820, and although loads goes on in that time period, it's not one of my favourites, and I don't know that much about it, which probably means I ought to read more to find out. But it means I sort of shy away from the Discord because I don't really know what's going on and I don't feel qualified to give any sort of opinions. We are now, however, coming up to Q4 of Historathon, and that takes the time period 1820 to the present day and is absolutely my favourite period. So I'm going to talk you through some books. I've got a vast great pile here. This is very much a pile of possibilities. There is no way I am going to get through probably half of these books, but we will see what we can do. Now, for those of you who don't know, Historathon is an annual year-long reading event. It was set up by Vin at Revenant Reads. I am very honoured to be one of the many co-hosts. There are some fabulous co-hosts. I'll list them below. Check out some of their videos. And as I said, we're getting to the end of the year, so the last 3 months of the year are dedicated to reading from 1820 to the present day, whatever you like, when it comes to history. I'm going to start, and I do have loads of books to go through, so I'm going to go through them very quickly. These little wonders, these are Oxford University Press very short introductions. I buy these whenever I see them out in the wild, so I've got quite an eclectic collection of them. But having a quick look through them, ones relevant to the Q4 time period are Globalization by Manfred B. Steger. I have 19th Century Britain by Christopher Harvey and H.C.G. Matthew. I have 20th Century Britain by Kenneth O. Morgan. I have Modern China, and this is by Rana Mitter. I have Northern Ireland, and this is by Mark Mulholland. I have The Russian Revolution. This is by F.A. Smith. And finally, I have The Spanish Civil War. This is by Helen Graham. I genuinely know nothing about the Spanish Civil War, and I think it's about time I found out. There's another couple of books that will feature shortly. So now we're going to move on to the larger books by size, physical size. I have not quite, but will finish Orlando Fige's Story of Russia, which is a general history of Russia. And the reason I want to do that is because I have this by Orlando Fige's, A People's Tragedy, which is a bit of a chunky monkey. And this is The Russian Revolution, 1891 to 1924. In addition, I have this, Fige's celebrated Natasha's Dance, which is a cultural history of Russia. But the majority of it tends to be set in this time period. Another couple of hardback books I have One is this, Singled Out. This is by Virginia Nicholson. And this is how 2 million men survived without women. No, wrong way round. How 2 million women survived without men after the First World War. And it's set in the UK, and it's about, well, it just highlights the number of men who died during the First World War and what that meant for the women who were left behind. Then we have this, and I've been meaning to read this for so long, 1968. It's by Richard Vinan. It's subtitled Radical Protest and Its Enemies. And apparently 1968 saw an extraordinary range of protests. And in here we have chapters on universities, the 68 generation, and then about protests in the US, in France, in West Germany, in Britain, sexual liberation, workers, and violence. It was a pretty protesting year. Finally, this is by Christopher Hilton, and this is The Wall, and it's the people's story. It's about the Berlin Wall, obviously, and goes from when it was erected in 1961, and its nearly 30-year history. Next, we have a big pile of paperbacks. I'm just going to get, they're in no particular order because I've just grabbed them off the shelf, so we're just going to go through them. Midnight in Chernobyl. I meant to read this last year, didn't get round to it. It's by Adam Higginbotham, and it is the true story of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster in the Ukraine in 1986. It looks fascinating. Maybe I'll get round to it this year. This book, Hans and Rudolph, is by a guy called Thomas Harding, and I read a book about him where he traced the history of his family home on the outskirts of Berlin. It was fascinating. I liked the way he writes, and I liked the way he discussed how he got the information as well. This is called Hans and Rudolph. Hans Alexander was the son of a prosperous German family who fled Berlin for London in the 1930s. Rudolf Hoss was a farmer and soldier who became the commandant of Auschwitz concentration camp. And this is their story. It says, an extraordinary tale deriving from meticulous research, the story of how a young Jew after 1945 almost single-handedly hunted down the commandant of Auschwitz. Back to World War I, and this is a story about conscientious objectors. We will not fight. I read a different story about conscientious objectors last year, but I still have this one. And now we're in First World War period, but we've moved to Ireland, and this is The Easter Rising. This is by Tim Pat Coogan. And this talks about the 6 days in April 1916, where there was destruction in many parts of Dublin and a number of civilians were killed. Some people say that was the true beginning of Irish independence. I didn't tell you who this was by. This book is by Will Ellsworth Jones. And this one I did say Tim Pat Coogan. Right, we are moving again. Eugene Rogan, The Fall of the Ottomans. This talks about it talks about the First World War, but we're looking not at the trenches. We're looking at the Eastern Front. And this book claims to have a revelatory analysis that explains the modern Middle East. It sounds interesting. It's meant to be very good. 2 now by Philip Sands. East West Street and The Rat Line. East West Street won the Baillie Gifford Prize. So that is about Philip Sands, who is an international lawyer, is going to the Ukrainian city of Lviv, and he starts on the trail of his family's history. It includes elements from the Nuremberg trial. This one, The Rat Line, Love, Lies and Justice on the Trail of a Nazi Fugitive. And this is an account of the life of Nazi SS Brigadeführer Otto Freiherr von Wachter. And this draws on diaries and letters. And what it's trying to discover what happened to Wachter when he was preparing to travel to Argentina on what was known as the Rat Line. This, the Manchester Martyrs, this is by Joseph O'Neill, and it is about an incident that took place before the Easter Rising in Ireland. It took place in Manchester, and it's the story of some men who were protesting and charged after a policeman was killed with murder, and also their trial. They were members of the Irish Republican Brotherhood. We have a number of books about Auschwitz. There appear to be a huge number of books like this. The Inspiring True Story of a Young Girl Surviving Mengele's Hell. This is by Eva Moses Kaur, and it's called The Twins of Auschwitz. Ava and her twin Miriam were 10 years old when they were put into the care of Mengele. Then this is based on the true story of Dieter Kraus. It is by Antonio Iturbi, and it is The Librarian of Auschwitz. Finally, we have the true story of 2 Jewish sisters at the heart of the resistance in the Netherlands. This is called The Sisters of Auschwitz. And there is more. This book by Caroline Moorhead was shortlisted for the Samuel Johnson Prize for non-fiction. It's about an entire village defying the Nazis in Vichy, France, and it's called Village of Secrets. There's a cluster of remote villages in the massive central region in France, and they are joined together by their remarkable efforts of resistance during the Second World War. SILs Journey. This is by Heather Morris. And Silke Klein, this is her story. She was taken to Auschwitz-Birkenau when she was 16. After the liberation of the camps, Silke's charged as a collaborator in Russia and sent to the stalags in Siberia. This one is also about the Third Reich, but this is before the Second World War. So, Travellers in the Third Reich. It's by Julia Boyd, and it's about the rise of fascism through first-hand accounts of ordinary people living in Nazi Germany. And it says these are accidental eyewitnesses to history. So those all sound fascinating. Non-First and Second World War books. I have The Dig Tree. This is by Sarah Murgatroyd. And this is an account of the ill-fated expedition in Australia in 1860 of Burke and Wills. Robert O'Hara Burke was quite an eccentric Irish police officer. And William Wills was an English scientist. They were trying to cross the continent of Australia. Finally, here's another one that I meant to read last year and didn't get up to. Rise Up Women. This is the story of the suffragettes. It's written by Diane Atkinson. And it's a really important part of UK history. So I really need to read it. Hopefully this will be the year. There's quite a few there. I have even more on here. I've got 88 books in my history section on, I think this is the Google app. I've got a book called Prequel, which is a story of how the Americans nearly joined forces with Nazi Germany prior to the beginning of the Second World War. It's by Rachel Maddow. I have another story that's called American Fly Girl, that is about a woman who trained as a pilot and did everything that people said she couldn't do. That's by Susan Tate Ankeny. The Forgers by Robert Morehouse is the true story about a really ambitious rescue operation during the Holocaust. Then I have a book by Michael Palin. This one, Great Uncle Harry, and that's about Palin's uncle who served in the First World War. Mozart and the Nazis by Eric Levi is about how the Nazis tried to use Mozart's music as propaganda. There's a book on Berlin, Life and Loss in the City That Shaped the Century by Sinclair McKay. Putin's People by Catherine Belton. How the KGB took back Russia and then took on the West, it says. What else do we have? The King of Chicago by Daniel Friedman. And this is a true story about 1920s Chicago. Bloodlands by Timothy Snyder. This is about Europe between Hitler and Stalin. Babi Yar by A. Anatoly. This is about the Holocaust in the Ukraine. There's a couple of books about sending children away during the Second World War. One's entitled Nobody Said to Go by Ken Cuthbertson, and the other is called I Seek a Kind Person, and that's by Julian Borger. I have Aftermath, Life in the Fallout of the Third Reich. That's by Harold Jana. And a couple about China. The Last Manchu by Henry Pugh Yi, and Empress Dowager Cixi. I have no idea whether that's how you pronounce it. It's spelt Cixi, and it's by Yung Chang. There's another book on the Spanish Civil War called Tomorrow, Perhaps the Future, and that's by Sarah Watling. A book simply called Russia at War, 1941 to 1945, that's by Alexander Worth. A New Ireland by Niall O'Dowd. How Europe's most conservative country became its most liberal. And then we have another book about Northern Ireland called Making Sense of the Troubles. There are so many books for me to choose from this quarter, and I'm really interested in this time period. I don't know why. Probably it was the one time period that I studied to any depth when I was still in education. Now I know that's a long time ago. In fact, it upsets me a bit that things that happened in that period are now being discussed by today's children in their history lessons. The Falklands War, for example, took place at a time when I was taking my O-levels, so I would have been 16. And now people are learning about it in history. Makes me feel old. Anyway, I can promise you a much more active role, both in the chats and by reading more this quarter. Like I say, this is my favourite quarter of Historathon. Check out the videos from other people below. I'll list our co-hosts, and let me know what you're planning to read. I'm really looking forward to this quarter. Thank you for stopping by. Like and subscribe, that would be lovely. But let me know what you're reading, more importantly. And I can't believe how quickly this year's gone. Anyway, that's it from me for today. Lovely to see you. Bye for now.